Okay, welcome back to the Jiu-Jitsu Mindset. It's Pete Deley going solo because Professor Lucas Hubo is out there doing the good work in the world of teaching, being a new parent. Submission coffee remains unclassified as a performance enhancing drug. So you can go to the jujitsumindset.com and get your subscription there. We hope that you do. And some of you have asked about that class we built for kids, and you can link to it through that site. And we're working on an app where you could capture both your both your pictures and your photographs, excuse me, your photographs and your video of either yours or your loved one's journey in jiu-jitsu. And we'll be releasing that about 8 to 10 weeks from now. I'm looking for testers too. If anybody would like to test, give us an email. The divine smiled on us once again. We get to talk to fascinating people every week, and this week is no exception. So I'm very happy to welcome Avery Lorenzato. Thank you for joining us, Avery. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to talk today.
We had a good conversation sort of before we started, so there's all kinds of things I probably would want to jump to, but I'll try to restrain myself here and kind of work my way into our conversation. But being a business owner and a coach of jujitsu and somebody who's running an academy, a gym, it's so much discipline and energy and effort to make those things happen. I'm curious if you hadn't gone down that road. Clearly, you've got a lot of self-discipline. Where might you have applied all that energy? If not jujitsu, what might you have done?
Um, I mean, in terms of work, in terms of like main life stuff, I have another business. So
Hmm.
this is I've had 7 small businesses so far. Actually
Okay,
just started number 8 recently. Um,
congratulations.
thanks. So jujitsu is to me the most fun game I've ever played. It's just absolutely addicting. And I've always been drawn to games, fascinated by games, whether it's I play Go, if you've ever heard of that,
Sure,
kind
of
of similar
course.
to chess. And so I got to I'm a one dan Go player, which is
Wow.
interesting. That's actually, and we can talk about that later. It's interesting. Kano got the belt ranking system from Go,
Okay.
the Q and the Dan. So Dan was like black belt. So it's like it definitely doesn't have the same connotation, but I'm a black belt in Go.
And Go as well. That's so awesome.
So, I would honestly be probably playing more of that, playing more chess to satisfy those game things.
Right.
But to me, jujitsu had that game aspect as well as being physical, as being a really healthy outlet where it's like, well, it's definitely better for me to be, doing jujitsu than playing chess.com on my couch. So I would be focusing on a different business and probably playing chess.com on my couch, binging Blitz.
Excellent. Well, PMD 100 is my chess.com name. So
Okay,
I'll see
okay.
you. I'll see you on the table also. Um, as a serial entrepreneur, as a person who's juggled lots of things all at the same time, uh, I have to ask. I mean, how have those things informed each other? As being a jiu-jitsu athlete affected you as a business person, and as a business person, did it affect your perspective of how you play the game?
I that's a great question. I think it has in that, I think the one of the most wonderful things about jujitsu is that at some point you're gonna be forced to reckon with the fact that you can't not even master it all. You can't know it all,
Right.
right? So it's like
Yeah.
what's the effective things, understanding like, I love the kind of framework that jujitsu is like a highly chaotic nonlinear system. And business can be as well,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, what are your heuristics? What are your goals? What are your frameworks? How do you measure success? How do you, reflect, evaluate, understand if you're on the right track, if you're not? And then really more than anything, just understanding when you need to switch because
Yeah.
you're going down a rabbit hole that is not going to have, a good return on your investment for time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in business really struggle with that. A lot of people really want to build the perfect product, build the perfect
Right.
solution, right? And not focus on what actually is gonna give a return on investment, like sales, marketing, understanding like
Yeah.
what's your funnels, what are your processes, how are you dealing with leads, following up, and all of that jazz.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, there's a very meaningful distinction between knowledge and wisdom. And I
Mm,
mean, you can learn the mechanics of something and you can apply those mechanics. And there is a linear progression, I think, to understanding like how one, two, three, four works. However, wisdom to me is like, well, when do you apply one and three and five and seven?
mhm,
And they're not
mhm,
always that. As somebody who uh, for chess, like I had to go through the linear experience of like what is this game's been played for thousands of years. People have figured out what a good opening is, and not
yeah,
like it's not time for me to be creative. It's time for me to learn sort of the basics and get good at, one or two openings. That analogy stays in my head when it comes to jiu-jitsu, where I think for me, my brain and body are still having trouble connecting. Like, okay, what I'm supposed to do, can I physically
mhm,
express that idea? Um, and then the way in which I get less frustrated is to focus on fewer and fewer ideas and just try
mhm.
to be competent at like something. I don't know if any of my teammates would say I'm competent at anything yet, but that's my objective. So as you in jujitsu, when you have this framework of particularly as you call it a game, right? Because it's a martial game, so it's a
Mhm.
combat game. Was the connection between your mind and body like an easy one for you to make? And I'm curious about your relationship to the aggressive part of it too. Like,
Mm,
were you able to see it, express it in go from your mind to your body, and then were you able to modulate how aggressive to be in it? Because I find in the beginning, in particular, it can be a disadvantage to want to go too hard because you're not really learning and you're fighting, but you don't really know what you're doing
yeah.
was my experience for myself. Let me just qualify that.
That's
That's that. Yeah.
it's a pretty universal experience. In terms of the mind body, I mean, I love all sports, love all games, but I love all sports, anything physical. I'm a highly competitive person, which can sometimes be a boon, sometimes a burden.
Right.
Um, and I have my background primarily with sports. The most like influential or kind of piece of that has been that I was a gymnast.
Oh,
Um, so the balance, body awareness,
yeah.
proprioception kind of background that I had from that really, I think more than anything else I've done in my life, that set me up for success at jujitsu. And it was funny when I first started, I would get asked very regularly, "Oh, where did you wrestle?" Right? And it's like, "I've
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
wrestled."
Yeah.
People would be
Yeah.
like, "I can't sweep you." And it's like, "Well, I know how to not fall."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But, so it really for me was it fit in with like, I wouldn't call myself an athletic person in most respects. Like, I'm never gonna be the fastest. I'm not a fast runner. I can't jump high, right?
Mhm.
I have good hand-eye coordination, but not exceptional,
Mhm.
right? So always kind of middle of the pack athlete in terms of those things. But the skills that I did have, or the kind of strengths that I had
Yeah.
athletically really lent themselves to jujitsu more than any other sport I've done.
Yeah.
And so part of the reason why I'm sure like, reflecting, yeah, I think it's fun, but I'm sure part of the reason I thought it was so fun was that I was good at it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So it came to
Yeah.
you naturally. Yeah. Yeah. Relatively speaking.
Um, but yeah, that has been on that side of things, yes, like I didn't have any struggles in terms of like connecting the
Hmm.
mind and the body on that front. And I've an engineering background, a big systems person. If anything, um, it was earlier, I would say, like, earlier kind of in journey, whatever you wanna call it, I wanted to systematize too much
Right.
and
Yes.
have a direct answer for things,
Yeah.
and I really found much more improvement once I moved towards more concept heuristics, and goal-oriented thinking rather than systems thinking, especially in the more chaotic situations like guard passing versus guard play,
Right.
whereas, like, if I get on someone's back in a straitjacket, I have a system. Like I know what grips
Yep.
I'm generally looking for, and I'll deviate from that system.
Right.
And the last thing that you had kind of asked about was the aggression aspect, and that I would say like I'm definitely not like if anything I struggle with not going hard enough now. at times. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I'm sure a very large part of it is that as a coach, too much of the time I am both uh, training in a way to try and facilitate learning for my students.
Sure.
Um, and also just I don't get as many competitive rounds as I'd like to.
Right.
Although at first, me, like most other people, I was a knuckle dragger, a mouth breather, a caveman, and was told that by my coach for a couple years before I figured out, like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe
right.
maybe going slow is good.
Yeah, yes, yeah, right. What is it? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? That whole
Yeah, yeah. It
I
was
you
also
know,
hard. I was a big guy when I started jujitsu. I was like 235 pounds. I lifted weights a lot. I could deadlift 600 pounds. I was a big, strong guy. So it took me a while to learn like my 20% of someone else's 80. I need to chill.
the I in the early 80s there was a gymnast who was like 6'1", and I know him very casually. He lives in Arizona. But but you might be a bigger gymnast than he was if you were at 235. Usually I'm about 5'8", 5'9", and my family has some gymnasts in it. So
Mhm.
you must have been an extraordinary gymnast to carry a lot of mass
No,
and
no,
be
no.
able to do it.
When I was doing gymnastics, I was like 175.
Even so,
Um,
that's a big gymnast. Yeah.
yeah, I was too big. I was never going to be that great, but I loved it. So
Yeah,
again, it was like I was more middle of the road in terms of gymnastics. My body wasn't suited for it,
sure.
but I really liked it. But the skills that I got from it, uh,
Yeah, and I actually want to linger on that just for a second because I'm curious how you found gymnastics because if anybody wanted to listen to me about children and athletics, to not skip gymnastics as
oh yeah.
a
Mhm.
role, it would be what I would tell everybody, spend some length of time.
Mhm.
My uncle was a gymnast, and as a child, like child,
Mhm.
3, 4 years old, we would be headstands and handstands and L sits as kind of
Mhm.
play. And I never became a gymnast, but I know that those things affected particularly proprioception, like where am I in
Yep.
space, just mattered. So um how did it come to you? How did that fall into your athletic life?
So I did some before this, but the main way I just got really lucky. The high school that I went to, in Louisiana was I don't know if you're familiar with the term magnet program.
Sure.
Um, but it was a magnet school, and specifically it had this weird thing, and it's kind of comical. So they had in their charter that they could only have lifetime sports, right?
Hmm,
So we didn't have basketball, we didn't have football. For some reason that charter it was like basically just the big ones weren't in there,
right.
but we had tennis, there's golf, there's soccer. Somehow they snuck in lacrosse and gymnastics.
That's so
Um,
wild.
so, like, at my high school, we could take that as a PE credit. So, I took gymnastics, during PE. That was the main way. It's just, every day I was in gymnastics program,
Wow.
for all 4 years, and then luckily we moved from uh, like, a 7-class schedule to an 8-class block schedule in my senior year. So my senior year, I got to take, 2 gymnastics classes, so I was doing gymnastics, like, 2 hours a day.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just like, every day was just, and for me, it was like, I did some competitions and did okay, but I was like, it wasn't about that as much as it was just like, this is fun, this is play, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
exciting. So, it would have been better if I'd started as a kid, started younger.
Sure.
Um, but even then, just, like my events were always rings and high bar. So it was always like,
Okay.
and especially rings. And it was like, doing the same thing over and over and like trying to tweak that same move the tiniest way and get feedback of how it
Yeah.
felt and like how do I flip this way versus that way and like like what the movement of a gazogi, right? So like and I was never like big on the more strength based
Okay.
kind of skills. So
Right.
like I could never fully get an iron
Yeah, I was
cross.
gonna say that's a big iron cross at 175.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
my legs have always been pretty big.
Sure.
So it was always like my legs are long for my height.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah,
wide frame, but my legs are long and big for my height. So an iron
right.
cross is just that pommel's not my event. Like that was not and floor I was okay at tumbling, but like But it was mainly like, oh, I just want to play on the mini tramp, do flips on rings and high bar,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of gymnastics as a lifetime sport, I can tell you one of the real pleasures of my uncle as a gymnast is that he, as a teenager, putting him in his early 50s, we go, he lived in New York and I moved out of New York pretty early in my life. And if I came back, we go down to the park. Um, he'd jump up on the swing set bar and he could
Hmm.
still do giant swings and dismounts at like 54. And
That's wild.
so like as a young person, it was a really good model of how you can carry an athletic
Yep.
disposition with you throughout your entire life. As a person who's had a real like thoughtful approach as a teacher and as a learner, when you think about the acquisition of jujitsu knowledge, information, techniques, does it feel like it has an obvious analogy, or does it feel unique?
Um, it feels somewhat unique. And there's several reasons why. Both from the learning perspective and the coach, the structure, the environment perspective. Um, for me, I think from the learner's perspective, if you compare something like tennis, right? You have a
Yeah.
forehand, you have a backhand, you can add certain types of spin, but the overall number of skills that you're looking to develop
Mhm.
are much smaller, much smaller. Um, and so it's more about most sports tend to be more about perfecting a like really maximizing a small number of skills. Whereas jujitsu, I would say there's just too many ways that two bodies can interact. The
Yeah.
variability is so much higher than anything else, any other sport, in my opinion.
Right.
Um, that because of that, you have to have an element of jack of all trades.
Right.
So at everyone has to have a jack of all trades skill, and then at the higher level, you do see back to that. Let's hyper focus on one thing. Like Wojcik, right? I'm hyper fixating on a Woj lock, or
Right. Right. Yeah.
some of the best training partners I've had, the most skilled training partners are like, yeah, they know how to do a lot of different submissions, but they hit arm bars, right?
Right.
That
Right.
is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the we
Yeah.
are this is my skill. But just that base level of jack of all trades, I think is really unique. Um, and then from the environment structure, I mean, if you look at any other structured sport, right? Like we have youth programs where we're lumping kids together in the same program. The expectation is they're going to be there every practice with the same exact kids. And
Right.
they are
Yeah.
I know who's going to be there. I know what classes, what practices they've already been to. I know what skills
Right.
everyone's working on, right? And then you translate that to jujitsu. It's like, who's gonna be here today?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knows, right?
Right.
And just we have black belts in the same class as a blue belt, right? Like
Right. Right.
that's and we have kids that are 2 weeks in and 4 years in,
Right.
right? And we're in the same class, and it's like those are very different students, very different skill levels, and what they know, their background, it is so varied, as well as, like, I mean, even the names we use for particular skills, the language
Sure.
around it can vary depending on where they've trained before. And I think that has a huge amount to do with, like, coaching jujitsu is just so different.
Yeah.
The environment that we learn in is so different than almost any other sport, any other skill or physical activity or
I
game.
Yeah, no, and in my opinion, the expression of the sport from a competition perspective, I mean, I think wrestlers like okay, there's wrestling out there.
Mhm.
Um, I was never a wrestler, but I boxed and did some karate as a child and as a
Oh,
young
cool.
person, and that sort of the anxiety of boxing and the anxiety of the soccer field were two different types of
Yeah,
anxieties for obvious
yeah.
reasons. And so, um, when you think about the role of competition in somebody's jujitsu journey, where do you come down on jujitsu as a value, or excuse me, as competition as a valuable or not kind of experience for a learner?
Um, yeah, that's a hard question. So I've actually never competed.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it's partially because um I just didn't want to have the risk due
Yeah.
to the American healthcare system and
Sure.
my job as a consultant,
Yeah.
and health insurance being iffy at times, like what the situation is, changing employers, et cetera, and always being worried.
Yeah.
Partially also because I was like, I was a big guy,
Right.
and I'm like, I don't want to do a competition with other big guys, uh, at blue belt adult level, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
purple
Yeah.
belt adult level.
Yeah.
I like those some of those guys are scary.
Oh, indeed.
Like,
Indeed.
I've actually been really thinking about competing recently. And that kind of the last thing is I was always like, it just seems silly to compete at it seems silly to care about competition before black belt,
Right.
right? Like, because it's like all the other levels, I'm like, everything has an asterisk, right? And like, I think that there's less. I understand, like, if you look at any other sport, differentiating competition based off of age
Mhm.
totally makes sense. Based off of weight, totally makes sense. But based off of like an arbitrary skill level, that seems silly to me. So I was always like, who cares? Now I'm at the perspective of like, if you want to compete at black belt, it sure would have helped to
Yeah.
compete at,
Yeah.
at all the
Yeah.
other
To
levels.
work out your wiggles
Yeah.
at the belts below. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've just heard from so many people like, someone at the way that they train at the gym and the way that they train or they compete, like the level that they can compete at are not the same things.
Yeah.
Um and I've done a lot of like competition classes, competition roles with a bunch of different people, really good people. And like I've found that true too is just, there's a wide difference. In terms of like as a coach, I have seen big development jumps from students competing.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen people come in and they do a competition and it's like, wow, they just fast tracked 6 months
Sure.
of development in a weekend. Like they isolated what they need to work on and it focuses them. And it focuses them in a way. I think a large part of that is that it's easy to tell someone what to focus on. And I'll make an analogy for like because we're a CLA based gym,
Yeah.
so like we all game based structure. The kids will break any game you make, right? So if you're not careful about how you word something, they'll break it. So for instance, I love with like the little kids, we play a game called Sticky Backpack, right? And um, what they'll do is like, so Sticky Backpack, we're starting on someone's back. The defender wins if they can turn and face their training partner. Well, at first I said, I told them if you can get chest to chest, right? So what'll happen is they will, as someone is escaping, the attacker will just turn away and be like, "You're not facing we're not chest to chest, right? So you don't win." And it's like, well, that's a horrible response. That is not what you want to do, right? So it's like you have to tell them, it's like you try and say, no, 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 don't do that, don't do that. You can tell them, don't do that till your face turns blue.
Right.
You have to change the rules of the game. You have to say no, chest facing their torso instead of
Right.
chest to chest.
You're right.
So in that same response, I see that the kids are like a hyper example of that. But even with adults, like I can tell adults like, don't do this, don't do this, don't
Right.
do this, and they'll still do it. But if I change the rules of the game and I say you lose if you do this,
You're right. Right.
then they'll listen. So I think a large part of that competition big jump is that you can tell them you need to work on half guard, you need to work on half guard, you need to work on half guard. Well, like half guard bottom, like your half guard bottom's not good. Well, they get to competition and then they get their half guard passed and they're like, oh shit, I need to work on my half guard.
Yeah.
Right.
Consequences. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
for me, I mean, looking at like under 10, 10 to 20, 20 to
Mhm,
30, 30 to 40,
mhm.
I'm 54. So 50 to 60 is still, when I say I've competed, I don't mean that I've competed at anything meaningful, but I've done my local competitions and,
Mhm.
they've been great for me for, 99% of why they're great for me is everything besides the competition. I mean,
Yeah.
how I eat, how I, you know,
Yep.
the idea of calming myself, you would
Mhm.
think by my internal state in those competitions, there was actually something at stake when there's,
Yeah.
clearly not. Um, well, I mean, but you've rolled with a lot of people I know, and you've had a
Yeah.
lot of like experiences with extraordinary black belts, and
Yeah.
maybe you could tell us about. I know you have a lot of stories. Maybe you pick one that comes to mind of one of
For
your great
most
roles.
memorable?
Yeah, let's
Most
do the
memorable,
most
yeah.
memorable. Yeah,
Um, Rob Biernacki has a black belt named Corey. I trained with him. This is gonna stick in my head forever. I'll give you two.
Okay.
Rob Biernacki has this black belt named Corey, and he's an incredibly good black belt, 225 pounds. Outweighs me by a lot now. I'm down to 185. Um, and this man uh pressure tapped me like this was like a week ago. He pressure tapped me in like less than 45 seconds from bumping fists. And that is the first time I've been pressure tapped, I think in 5 years,
Okay.
right? I mean, and I mean it was instant. It was
Right.
instant. I have never rolled with someone that I felt that helpless with.
Right.
Um, and so that one's gonna haunt my dreams.
For
Keep
sure.
me up at night for a while. And then the maybe I'll give you three. That's one. Um, when my first day of jujitsu, I had a person that was smaller than me, mother's milk me. Um, and that was I was like instantly I was like, no, I can't live knowing that a man can do this to me. Right? Like I have to know what this wizardry is. Like what what just happened? And that kind of was like the catalyst for me learning
Right.
jujitsu. Um, and then the third one, I was talking about this recently, but I remember as a big guy, I came in. There was this older purple belt. He was probably around your age, mid 50s or upper
Hmm.
50s. His name's Greg. He's a black belt now. And every time he would just let me get to side control and roll me over repeatedly. Um, and that was I remember that was the one early on that I was like, okay, this works. Like this is like I
Yeah.
cannot,
Yes. Right.
yeah, I can't hold this man. I can't even stay on top of this person. This doesn't make sense. And I mean, he's an average purple belt. He's not anything like he's not a world class athlete. He's like an old hobbyist purple belt.
Yeah.
And I could not hold him down. And those really like the combined of like both like, starting jujitsu and being like, if you don't know anything, this is what happens.
Right.
And then being like, even if you know a little bit, it's
Somebody who knows more, yeah, is in the
it
driver's seat.
is in the driver's seat. And then third, you can practice as long as you want. You're not going to be Corey.
Yes. And that, yeah, that's, I mean, the clarity that jujitsu offers in that I think is different than other things. I mean, the time I spent in some weightlifting, worlds, the notion of like, can you pick it up or can't you pick it up
Yeah.
was a clear thing. Like,
Yep.
well, I have a stronger deadlift than you. Well, can you
Yeah.
pick 600 pounds up? Well, no, I can't pick up 600 pounds, but I do have it, like you can't say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find jiu-jitsu encourages and requires like a degree of honesty to go, well,
Mm.
this person, this person is so much better than me, and it's not, I if I don't admit to that, now I'm in
Yeah.
danger because now I'm doing
Yeah.
stupid stuff thinking that, you know, that
No,
I
and
can't. Which
it's an
I find very valuable in other parts of life, like,
yeah. Yeah.
if you can't be honest about the circumstance, there's usually a punishment that
Yeah.
comes associated with that. So much worse than if you just say,
Yeah.
okay, I got to regroup. This is not working.
I will say it is interesting though, both the way that you can define success in jujitsu is so varied, especially because
Sure.
of like at the end of the day, like there's no governing body, there's no widely agreed upon rules. And so for instance, like, I personally don't like EBI overtime jujitsu players, right? I
Hmm.
think that that is a poor representation of the sport. I think that just being able to not be tapped and then be
Yeah.
really good at getting out of back control
Right.
and like maintaining back control is like a poor representation of our maybe whether you call it the sport or the martial art.
Right.
And then separately, you know, jujitsu in an MMA context, jujitsu in more of a combat jujitsu context, where you're not trying to, maybe and even like, you see videos of like I can do jujitsu, you're striking, how to like neutralize someone without hurting them,
Sure.
or it's like, and then lastly, in a competition setting, because I still think like for all the faults, I agree most with IBJJF
Okay.
competition, like the I still have a lot of problems with it, but, like, the idea of, like, guard passing versus guard playing being the most important thing, like, that's what most matches are determined on.
Yeah, right,
I do think that that is a good representation of, like, of the sport in terms of, like, what's important, guard passing, guard playing.
right, right.
Like, it's, submissions, yes, this, that, and the other, but, like, and of course, like, I'm much more, I love watching any, competitors that actually can get submissions,
Yeah,
but it's like watching, Levi Jones Leary guard or Joseph Chin guard passing. I'm like, that's the pinnacle.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. I mean, I have such a, when I see it through my own lens, because I'm in terms of what's successful for me, and I think about other people in their self-image of themselves and 50 and 60
Mhm.
year olds as when you diminish your expectations that I can't move in these ways or all that, I think it's a rapid it's a slippery slope towards not being able to do things. And I have a great friend named Professor Tom Dwiggins. He had both shoulders replaced in the last,
Yeah,
year, and he's a black belt, and he's rapidly healed. And I think about him and that sort of grit and resilience. And then on the other end of the spectrum, when I come in, and I love to watch the littlest kids, train, and I think
yeah,
for the rest of their lives, they will have encountered threat in a way that, like,
yeah,
when I think about being punched in the nose as a child, but on like a street yard type
yep,
fight, it was valuable because it taught me that I wouldn't die, in that, and that,
yep,
if you're not able to stand up, not that you shouldn't avoid all physical confrontations and so on and so forth, but there are times in which certain things become unavoidable, and it reduced the level of anxiety and fear that should I be in those circumstances. So when I look at the little kids, I think, oh, they will carry with that. I was nervous. I
yep.
regrouped, and then I got out of my trouble. I think we'll follow them. Where, well, along those lines, and you probably have many stories about how jujitsu might have affected somebody in the community. Do you have a particular one that's your favorite, that, hey, jujitsu mattered to this person in a special way?
Um, I would say out of everyone, I don't wanna say their name, but I've had a
Sure.
student that was, uh, a recovering alcoholic
Hmm.
and had relapsed many times
Okay.
and has been sober for, you know, got sober for several years, and is still sober as far as I know. Um, and kind of found that, like, in a lot of ways, like, what is jujitsu, right? And I said, like, the a representation of the martial arts, and it's like that's more to do with, like, competition or physical prowess, skill,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like, what is jujitsu? It's like it's a great workout in a great community, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
In that community, that third place aspect, that
Right.
for this person, for this man, you know, um, was a substitute for, going to the bar and a
Sure.
substitute in a lot of ways for going to AA, right? And
Right.
so it's like, a lot of people it's like, where is your third place? And
Hmm.
with, the kind of like societal impacts of like, no longer having, like, people don't go to church, right? And
Sure.
people don't have that aspect in their lives to nearly the same degree that they used to. And that was a third place. Or going to places like the Elks Lodge, right?
Sure.
Like those third places, like finding a community that you can plug into that has a positive impact on your life.
Yeah.
Um, I think that is probably to me the most important aspect of what jujitsu is.
Yeah.
And I think that their experience of having that, um be that positive aspect
Yeah.
is probably that would be my favorite story, just because
Yeah.
it's like that is such a good example of the benefit, because yeah, and you're talking about you being older as well and still training and redefining what success is, and it's like I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that that's taboo. I don't think you don't have to go into a jujitsu gym and, with the goal of being the best, right?
Right.
I think you're competing against yourself. Your goal is to be a better version of yourself, whether that is, your better version is defined by your skill level in jujitsu, or, in
Yeah.
whatever rule set you happen to view that as.
Right.
Or if it's, hey, I want to be a healthier person. And just to bring up again, to piggyback off of what you said about competition, right? Like, I do think that's another incredible value of competition, is like setting those goals and
Yes.
achieving them.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the inoculation against stress for children, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
inoculation against stress, against hardship. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, I feel very strongly about that, particularly with the girls. I just
mhm,
I think boys will sometimes have those type of stresses forced upon them, and girls in different ways, but that sort of that
yeah.
physical thing. And I think if a person decides to stay beyond a year or even up until that year, then they are submitting to the community, so to speak. Not to use that metaphor, but I mean because you can't learn it on your own. So
No, yeah.
and if you're isolated, which so many people in the world are, it forces a communion that can't
Mhm.
be, I think, replicated because there's very few places where grabbing and holding somebody would be an acceptable
Yeah, yeah.
dynamic. So I couldn't agree more. Well, listen, I've loved this conversation, and I'm grateful that you took the time. And maybe you come back and we can do this again sometime. But this was great.
Thanks, thanks. Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope this was enjoyable, for your listeners. Hope someone gained something of it. And yeah, if there's anything I wanted to say at the end is just like, kind of what we talked about. Jiu-jitsu being so many different things. I think that there's a lot of pressure that comes from a lot of different coaches about how good you are and
Right.
defining like, coaches wanting to live vicariously through their students based off
Sure.
of their competition and
Yeah.
like all of this pressure about like living up to some standard. I really just think that like it can be so many different things. And if you find value in it, like the important thing is that you're enjoying yourself and it's a positive aspect of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we started the podcast because we just don't want people to quit because we
Yeah.
think, whatever it's going to be doesn't reveal itself to you in any other way than over time. So just don't
Hmm.
quit, and you're going to be happy about that. Nobody ever, got 30 years into their jujitsu journey and said, "Man, what a waste of time." That was a
Yep,
terrible idea. All right. Thank you very much, Avery. This was awesome.
for sure. Thank you so much.